Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. I'm Dr. Andrew Patton. I'm excited to be in your space. If you're catching this, where you're catching it, wherever you may be, anywhere around the world, I'm glad that you are here and that you scrolled right here to hear some sports and spiritual things. And now let me tell you a little bit about what that means, because spiritual things, of course, that terminology definitely has been hijacked. So I am a pastor, so I want you to know that. So I'm not talking about other those spiritual things that, most people think in that regard. No shade. It's just kind of make sure we know what that looks like. But in a previous life, I've hosted shows before. If you go back to Blog Talk Radio, I had a show called The Sports Critic, and I enjoyed doing it. But I'm going to tell you this. I believe that in the sports talk world, there is a space to really merge sports and spiritual things, in particular with athletes now. And nothing new, of course. There's always been men of faith that was connected to the sports world as athletes and broadcasters. There still are. But I'm inspired by what I see in this young generation that, so to speak, wear their faith on their sleeves. So from that perspective, you will hear those kind of things. You also will hear sports talk. We will come up with provocative commentary and even discussion points to really dissect. So I'm excited about this inaugural podcast. I'm excited to be right here in the A, where they don't play. Of course, A-Town all day. I don't know what y'all say down here, but it's okay. I'm doing my very best, and I'm thankful for my producer, Mr. A to Z, or Zay, or I'm not going to say Zay Doggy Dog. He said he don't like that. I won't do that to him, but he's right over there, and he's going to keep me grounded and ask me some tough questions at times, in particular if I may run over something or I may say something from a spiritual or biblical perspective that's worth digging into. But this first podcast is going to touch a hot button topic that I believe that has captured the nation's commentary or attention. It is in the person of Neon Deion, as we knew him back in the 90s and 80s, or Prime Time, or Deion Sanders, or just simply Coach Prime, as most times we refer to him as. And this podcast, or this sermonette, if you want to look at it that way, sports and spiritual things. Come on, Pastor, keep them engaged. The gospel according to Deion Sanders. That's what we're going to call this. And why did I come up with that? I'm so glad you asked, because what's interesting about Deion Sanders is the fact that in certain respects, he could be a lightning rod depending on how you like your coach or how you like your sports figure or the guy that you cheer for. I grew up watching Deion Sanders. I'm in my late 40s, so I'm a child of the 1970s. I'm a Gen Xer par excellent, and I tell you, I remember watching Deion high step down the sidelines after picking off, your favorite quarterback, or certain legends that we can talk about, from Joe Montana to, any guy that I can not even think of off the top of my head, but he got them all. Steve Young, whom he also picked off and played with, Troy Aikman, who he intercepted and also played with. So from that perspective, Deion's playing career is definitely well documented. But when you walk through the steps of how he became a head coach, starting at the Pee Wee level, coaching his sons, and coaching at the high school level in Texas, and doing those kind of things, true to Deion's persona and charisma, and even his maverick, and dare I say, even rebel, persona to some, Deion Sanders is a genius. Some of the things that I may say may come across as hating, but I want to help you to understand something. We have to separate hating from critique. I can love Deion Sanders, as many of you may do, or even I don't hate him, definitely don't hate him. Can't hate a man you don't know, and you definitely can't hate on what he's doing, but you can't be critical. And the analysis that I'm going to give you today, depending on if you're a fan or analyst, it may even rub you the wrong way, or it may help you to be actually provoked to think a little bit deeply. That's what we'll do on sports and spiritual things. But the gospel according to Deion Sanders, well, the gospel means the good news, right? No, Deion ain't Jesus. He tell you that. He touts and he celebrates his faith, which I definitely applaud and definitely on board. I don't think it's fake. I don't think it's contrived. I think that Deion Sanders has shown fruit in that regard. Many may argue about his personal life, and that will be judgmental because all of us have come short of the glory of God in certain respects. So that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not going to pull out my inner Jason Whitlock, as somebody's accused me of before, from a space of certain things I have posted about Colorado and their meteoric rise or their resurgence in certain respects. But the good news, because that's what gospel means, the good news about what Deion Sanders is doing is he's able to uplift young men from all walks of life, and not just from the hood or not just from broken homes, but a lot of people, a lot of players are attracted to Deion's persona and his charisma. As a 56-year-old man, he is really able to stay relevant to the younger generation. He's willing and able to talk their language. He's able to pull in all types of luminaries from all different walks of life. That's the good news about who Deion Sanders is. But I'm about to be critical in how we have really looked at the persona of Deion Sanders and his success at Jackson State, his success in high school, his success even at Colorado. Some people may say, wait a minute now, he's 4-3. Is that successful? Well, when you start out 1-11 the year before, which he wasn't coaching that team because he was too busy doing well at Jackson State, you can look at that. But let's really walk through the critique of that, because when you look at, having a 4-star quarterback that happens to be his son, being able to flip the number 1 recruit at the time, Travis Hunter, to come to Jackson State, and for them to do very well, and him to go 30-7, and myself even being an HBCU graduate in Mississippi myself, shout out to Rust College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, actually the oldest HBCU in Mississippi, but I digress when it comes to the HBCU love. But I'll say this, what's interesting is that the chance that he got at Jackson State, and even some of the things that was the disconnect that maybe have caused some of the, the severance, or at least the severing of the ties. Because if you were like me, you were hoping that what he's doing at Colorado, he would continue to do at Jackson State. Just wasn't meant to be, just wasn't in the cards. And rightfully so, Deion Sanders moved on. Nobody ever faults a person for doing better for themselves. But I'll say this. I thought it was a missed opportunity in certain respects, and not because Prime shouldn't have moved on. I just thought that some of the things that he said about really a resurgence to the black college, history, and really not necessarily ever making up the gulf between Power 5 schools and black colleges from an athletic standpoint. And also, let's follow the money, ladies and gentlemen, because football makes a lot of money at the Power 5 level. So when we understand that, can't front him or fault him, I should say, in that regard. But I will say this, it would have been nice to see him, because, I've seen stuff where people are saying, well, Colorado was like an honorary HBCU. And a lot of HBCU alums like me are like, hold on now, we like Deion, we like Prime, but we don't like him like that, because Colorado can never be Tennessee State. It could never be Howard University. It can never be Jackson State. It could never be Southern. And the list goes on of some of the blue blood HBCU programs, and particularly when you do your research and you understand all the NFL players post-integration of the Power 5 schools with black talented athletes doing what they did at the HBCU level and then getting an opportunity to play in the Power 5. So with that being said, let's look at certain aspects of why I'm critiquing Deion Sanders and why I'm even talking about him. First, he moves the needle. Okay, his persona, his press conferences, the way he talks about his players, the way people are attracted to him, that's cool. But Zay, what I find interesting is as I go down the list and I ask myself certain questions, and I ask those questions and I look at it from an objective standpoint, not from a hater, not from somebody that wants to see him fail, because most times, again, with most fans of sports, when you really ask certain different questions, people don't like critique. The easy thing to do is just say you're a hater. or it's just easy to say that you don't like the guy. And there's certain people that do critique with the lens of not liking Deion. Again, I want to reiterate that this is not what this is, because I'm all about progress. I'm all about shaking things up. I'm even about being who you are and doing what you do from a space of what makes you feel comfortable, what makes who you are. Because you can guarantee you, formerly the sports critic or sports and spiritual things will be exactly who I am, win, lose, or draw, whether you like it or not. I'm not apologizing for those things. I'm not saying I can't be wrong. I'm not saying that I may have to apologize if I say something that may rub someone the wrong way. Hey, I'm a spiritual man. I'm a pastor. I'm a leader. I'm man enough to apologize. But here's what I am man enough to do. I'm man enough to ask questions. I'm man enough to say, hey, what would I do if I was in those shoes? Or I'm going to pump my brakes on saying certain things about Deion or about Prime because I've never been a coach. I've never played the game. I can defer to that from their perspective. But what I can do as an analyst and even as a fan of the game, even though I do hate fandom and I think that emotions of fans cause us not to be as analytical or as critical from a space of constructive criticism that would allow us to look at Deion Sanders. So when we look at it, at Jackson State, the success was I could take Power 5 kids, bring them to the SWAC, and I could dominate. But in the Power 5, starting out 3-0, and then even on my Facebook page, and if you don't follow me on Facebook, please do find me there, because you will see that when they upset TCU back on 9-2, I said, hey, make sure you circle 9-23 and 9-30. And many of my critiquers, let me put it that way, I won't even call them haters. I won't do that because then that would make me a hypocrite if I did that, right? But many of the people that like to poke the bear with me when they lost, they were like, yo, well, nobody expected them to go 3-0. But did you say that when game day was on campus? Did you say that when Shannon Sharp and all those guys and all the luminaries and all the celebrities was at the game and they were the cat's meow? They had creeped into the top 25, and they were the darlings of the sports story. Let me tell you something about the media that a lot of times we don't like to admit. Because the media take it either way. They'll take a story, they'll take an underdog story, and they'll take a Greek tragedy true. And right now, not to say that the season is over, because being 4-3, the season is not over. I had them pegged on some like guest appearances on certain podcasts that they would go 7-5. If they go 7-5, the season to me is still successful. But with the bravado, right? With the receipts, with all the grandeur, all the grandiose things that are done on the sidelines, it really takes away from 7-5 if they get there. Because they can still lose. I hope they don't. But if they do and they get to 7-5, or if they get to, 6-6, it would still be an improvement. If they get to a bowl game, it's still an improvement. But it wouldn't match the persona of what was sold, what was said. Certain things that we saw people saying, and not just Deion, because most times with fans and even analysts, Speak for Yourself or on FS1 and all these shows, and Rich Eisen and all these people that are basically believing and saying they believe, or even in the press conference when certain questions was asked to Deion and he'd say, during that 3-0 start, it was, oh, you don't believe. Next question. And Deion is always nice, nasty to a certain extent, I think, and it's okay, right? That's swag. That's personality. Nobody says nothing when Nick Saban does that at certain times. Nobody ever said it when Urban Meyer did it. But you know what the difference is between those guys? They were national champions already. Until you win something significant at a level that really sells the fact that you can get a little bit prideful, or at least not necessarily prideful, or at least have your Ali moments, right? Where, he called George Foreman, not George Foreman, but he called Joe Frazier ugly. Or with George Foreman, he talked about he fought like a mummy, right? Or with Floyd Patterson and all those guys that he predicted in what round that he would knock out. It was cool when he started winning. Not so much before he won, when he backed it up. It was forgivable. He became one of the more celebrated and beloved figures even after he retired so many years after boxing. But here's the truth. 4-3 doesn't necessarily grant you the license to spike the ball in Cabbage Patch or high step to the end zone. In fact, there's a documentary that I would caution you, not caution you, I would say maybe invite is a better word. Because if you're a researcher like me, before you form certain opinions, if you watch the 91 Falcons documentary that I believe the NFL Network may have done, really what Colorado is like, it's kind of like that 91 season with MC Hammer on the sidelines, with Travis Tritt, the Maverick that Jerry Glanville was. It's almost like a recreation of that. And for me to reference that sitting right here in the A to Z studios in Atlanta really means something. Because though Colorado or Prime is not the first guy to have, like with Miami back in the 80s and 90s and certain parts of the 2000s with Luke Skywalker and all these different type of people that was on the sidelines and the attention that it brought the program, here's what's different. Again, they were winning national championships. We're not there yet, guys. When he announced that we're coming, right? And when they said it, and then they went 3-0, and then the fans started saying we're here, and it looked like it, right? And then Oregon showed up, right? USC showed up. Even Colorado State played them tough. I mean, for me, the first caution was that giving up 42 points against TCU made me say, wait a minute. Yeah, they won strictly off of the brilliance. Let me say this. The brilliance of Deion Sanders, the brilliance of Travis Hunter, and those skill positions that not only kept them in the game, that won them the game. I get that. But for someone like myself that is a critic, and not a destructive critic, but someone that says, look, if you got a donut on your tire doing 70 miles an hour and you're doing that for a month, donut tires don't last that well on raggedy cars, even on a nice car. And not saying that Colorado was raggedy. I'm just saying that defense, which we all know now, we got tape. We got receipts, as Deion would say. We got 7 games that shows that, man, you guys give up a lot of plays. You give up a lot of points.
Let me jump in real quick. To be a devil's advocate, right? I mean, he brought the same game day, went to Jackson State.
Sure.
Right? So we weren't saying any of that when he went to Jackson State.
No.
We only had a problem when he went to Colorado.
But he was winning at Jackson State. That's different. You're dominant at Jackson State.
But even – who's the other team that actually won the SWAC? They were dominant in their league too, but College Game Day didn't go down there. They went down there because of Prime.
Sure.
Right? So it's not so much that the team's good, it's that it's Prime.
Yeah.
And we got to understand also with media. Media goes where the views go. He's been hitting 9 million, 7 million, 10 million views watching the game. So me as a business, and I'm trying to get ad dollars, and I want high-priced ad dollars, and I know I can get at least 7 million viewers, that's the place I'm going, whether they win or lose.
Well, I get that, and I'm not mad at that. But what I'm also saying, in a point that I lifted up about maybe 5 minutes ago, I said the media will take the Greek tragedy just like they would the media darling or the story. So, case in point, when they lost to Stanford the other night, and ESPN had this collage of the many faces of Prime, where they showed him the first picture with the shades and the hoodie over his head and the smile. Mm-hmm. And as the game went on, the meme was kind of trolling. And not only was it trolling, but the last picture looked like the Kermit the Frog picture that says, like, to himself, hey, man, show him who you really are. It was trolling.
But the thing is, though, he knows that this is coming.
I'm not sure.
Deion knows because it's been like that his whole career.
Sure.
Now the challenge is the kids are the ones that are taking the brunt of him trying to – he's like a good dad. He's like LeVar Ball.
I don't know if you're going to be like LeVar, but go ahead.
But I'm saying how he promoted his kids.
Okay.
Right? And then the kids just couldn't really hold up to the pressure of what their dad – put out for them to have to try to withstand or take on that pressure. So I get that. Deion is really trying to, and some of the guys, some of the players just may not want that. And you find out who you really are. As let's talk about from a spiritual sense, right?
Sure.
Everybody likes to say God doesn't put more on you than you can bear.
I'm not sure if that statement is always fair or true. Because if it's on you, that means you got to bear it.
Right.
But I think that's always a feel good space to really try to quantify what situation you're in. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, how many recruits come to your campus, the rankings of your recruiting class, the views in the locker room. Because remember, when Dan Lanning, the Oregon coach, when they put that whooping on them a few weeks back, by 30 some odd points, right? Mm-hmm. He purposely allowed the cameras to be in his locker room.
Right.
And he purposely wanted to send a message from a space of, because see, one of the things that, and again, this isn't anything I hadn't said before. Now, it may be new because this is our first episode, right? But for those that know me personally or those that are on Facebook with me, when I said my concern is that when you say, hey, you didn't think these HBCU boys could do this, right? But then when you start to lose, then people start to rehash some of those things that they said that really they want to challenge you and see if you were the real deal at the Power 5 level. Now, again, going 4-3 is not bad, but Stanford is a bad loss.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, hey, there's no excuse for what they did in Stanford.
And 29 points down, right?
Right.
So
there's no excuse for that.
No, not at all.
But it's like, but then also Coach even said like he sensed his team getting complacent. And so here's the challenge that Prom's going to have is he's going to have to balance him propping his team up and them drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, see that's the point. So hype is one thing, right?
Yep.
Hype, because honestly, and again, this isn't anything new. Even like I was watching the Notre Dame game on Saturday night, and Joe Montana was on the sideline, and some other dignitaries and high-powered alum that we probably would know was there. But it's a different swag. Not because it's not loud or it doesn't, kind of like, because with the hip hop generation, which I'm a part of the golden age of hip hop, right? So I get it. I'm not mad at that part. But the critique is Notre Dame is 6-2, right? Oregon is, still what I think they lost.
They lost to Washington.
Yeah, they lost to Washington. But, those kind of programs, Washington had Cedric the Entertainer and I can't remember, Anthony Anderson on the sideline, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is Washington is undefeated.
Yeah.
Right. So from that perspective, what I'm saying is that from a critique standpoint, I'm not saying that Prime shouldn't have people at the program. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you became the media darling so quickly. And sometimes there's a such thing as peaking too soon, where when you kind of start out, it's kind of like a marathon, right? And you didn't train properly for it. And you start off running it like you're running the 40-yard dash. Well, by the time you get to a few more meters, and I've never ran track, so forgive me if I'm butchering the analogy, but I'm only saying from a perspective of saying, look, you started out fast, but now you're tired. Or we mentioned Muhammad Ali. George Foreman punched himself out, and then by round 8, he's knocked out. Not because he can't box, he's tired.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, when you look at Prime and you look at these kids, and even Saturday night, the effort where Travis Hunter did a yeoman's job playing both sides, but many critics have said, man, you may be running this guy in the ground. And on 1 or 2 plays, it looked like not only he got smoked, but he was tired.
But again, I mean, let's think of Heisman Trophy winners or people that have done both sides. You have
Charles Woodson.
You have Champ Bailey.
Yeah.
Right? Champ Bailey even said that people are going to come at you because you play both sides, because people are offended that you would be on both sides.
But the difference between those guys is because Champ Bailey and Charles Woodson played on stacked teams on all phases. This team is only great and stacked on offense. And that's only because, again, Shador and Travis and Weaver and a few other guys, right, that really can play. But then I know Prime's going to fix this. He's got to fix the offensive line. He knows that.
Yeah, and the defensive line.
Absolutely.
Because, you think about also the opportunity of having like a Warren Sapp's wanting to be on the staff.
Sure.
Right? So you're getting some greats that are wanting to be on staff to really help these guys and, honestly, to help Deion.
Sure.
Right? To help his boy. So he's bringing a lot of things, I think. And here's the other part. We got to think about there's casual fans and then there's fans of college football.
Sure.
Right? So, like, even myself, I'm a fan of Deion. But I knew Oregon and USC were going to be.
But in that revisionist though,
No.
Considering the hype.
No, I said I.
Okay,
It's Oregon. They're like, you got to think the coach. I think this is either his first or second year. They've always been ranked in the top 15 for the past at least 5 to 10 years.
Sure.
Right, from Chip Kelly all the way down till now, and then that coach came from Georgia.
Right.
So he already had the pedigree of a national championship with Georgia, so he's able to come and recruit differently. And as much as he wanted to bloviate about we don't do this for clicks, but you're at Oregon that wears different uniform colors all the time. But that
was a shot at Prime.
I know, but it's a hypocrite on your end.
Not necessarily.
Because the crazy part, when he came to the post show, he was like, well, let me humble myself.
Yeah, but because he didn't want to go that far. But here's the truth. My critique with that, with fans or supporters alike, or those that think I'm a hater, is that, look, you're not the only one that keep receipts, because you're not the only person that's going to say, I told you so. Or if you're going to talk trash, you're going to be able to take it. Growing up in my neighborhood in Memphis, we called it checking, right? You can't be the guy that can just, roast people, and then somebody roast you and now you're ready to fight. It can't go that way.
But see, we got to think about what is the fan saying and what is Deion saying, right? If you listen to everything Deion says, he takes the high road. And he always says, I don't care what they're saying over here. I got to fix what I got to fix over here. Right? Even with the guy that hit Travis Hunter, he didn't go after the kid and say it was dirty. He said it's a football play.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, that's the part. That's really where we should take the conversation, are these casual fans that don't know nothing about, but they know Deion from the 80s.
Sure.
90s, right? Prime time.
Fair.
They got to see him on TV. Like, they don't know football like that.
Sure.
Like, if his game may have done on a normal 3 million, right? But you got all these casuals now that's 5 million people because the media is hyping it.
Sure.
That now they're seeing him in commercials.
And it's a great story.
It's a great story. I mean, he's been on Aflac commercials for the past few years with the great Nick Saban. So it's like that marketing arm that has allowed him to get the notoriety of regular people. So it's like those people had the expectations. But if you know college football, and then we got to think about these sports radio guys. I mean,
don't get me started on that, but go ahead.
They got to keep the views up too.
Sure.
The debate shows, they got to play the roles.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like when we have this conversation, we got to be able to separate the two, even for our viewers, to let, like, hey, as a person that really doesn't play football, hey, you got to be mindful of where you even put somebody if you don't know it compared to.
Well, let's do this, because from a spiritual perspective, we've leaned a lot into the sports part. Mm-hmm. And then we got some questions that we're asking. We'll wrap this up because everybody probably can't take much more of this because they think either I'm a hater or I'm crazy, either one or ugly, one of the two. But I'll put it this way. The Bible specifically talks about, not boasting for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Now, for most people that are believers, that kind of swag, and I say that with air quotes. Let's do that. Let me unfold my arms. Let me show you I'm not just I'm not a robot. From that perspective, that would be a little punitive for me. But at the same time, be not deceived. God's not mocked. For what a man plants, that's what he reaps, right? So what Dan Lanning planted, or at least what Deion planted, and then Dan Lanning gave it back to him, or even Colorado State's coach, who I thought had some stuff that he said out of bounds, right? From certain points of the shades. I think that was clickbait from a space of he's in the same state. I mean, CSU and CU are not that far away from each other, and Deion's sucking up all the attention, right? So what do I do to get some attention on my program? I get it, right? I'm not saying it was classy or classless. I'm just saying I could see the both sides of it, right? So then if I look at what Coach Jay could see, he said, look, he's probably thinking, these guys could easily be 1-2, from those first 3 games. The comeback, right? Mm-hmm. Or the slow starts, mm-hmm. Some of the holes that he probably saw on film from just 2 or 3 games, right? Yeah. So from that perspective, he's fighting for his attention in that state. And not only in that state, but nationally to recruit. And Deion, as you said, and stated, it's one thing to look at his charisma from a boastful standpoint, and some people may try to pigeonhole him in that respect. He's not boasting. What he's really saying is that I want to speak life into a program that's really been dead for the last 10 years, right? Carl Durrell, who had been an experienced coach whom he replaced, who coached at UCLA, and who really worked his way up through the ranks. Because one of even my critiques, and I'll be honest, I didn't like Deion being at Jackson State. Here's why. I thought it was unfair to coaches at the HBCU level that had been coordinators, who had really paid their dues. Here's a guy with this persona, right? No shade to him, right? But when we talk about black coaches not getting opportunities, and when you're in a mostly black league, about this conversation, and even adding the spiritual component into it, is that there's a difference in between speaking life and declaring something and boasting, saying, look what I got, versus these are my expectations. I think for most people that critique Deion in that regard and don't like him for that perspective, those of us that grew up with Prime and we are in that community and we're of that ilk, we don't see it that way. Some people still do. Some people may see it that way because maybe there is a racial undertone there. I do believe that sometimes it's not always racial undertones. I think sometimes people are just more conservative by nature. There are certain black people that don't necessarily like Prime's charisma in that regard. Some people think that that's what I'm saying, and I'm not. I'm simply saying that when you're trying to build a program, what you want to do is you don't want to give people that hate you anyway, that fuel. But then again, to Prime's, defense in that regard is that if he's going to go down swinging, he might as well be himself. And I could definitely respect that, because guess what? I'm going to be me too. So I get that. Yeah. But from a critique and longevity standpoint, 3-0 really lit the fire. Yeah. And it made us think, or at least some people don't want to admit it, and it's okay. I'm not mad that people may not want to admit it. Yeah. But I'll say this: 3-0 made you start to think about the possibilities. Because I saw people saying, "Man, they can go 10-2." I saw that on social media, and I saw that even from a standpoint of guys like Shady McCoy, that's on Fox Sports. That's like, man, they're gonna beat Oregon. He said that. Yeah. Right.
He was smoking.
And that's fine. I ain't mad at it, but you're not going to tell me he didn't get caught up in the hype.
And I was hopeful they beat Oregon, but I knew that's just, man, it's Oregon.
I told you that fandom is for suckers. I still believe that. So from that perspective, it wasn't that I didn't think or I was trying to predict. It was like, bro, because anything can happen because the game ain't played yet. Yeah. But when you circle those dates, and you look at the rest of that schedule, Stanford, that loss does you no favors, because you still got to see Oregon State. Yep. You still got to see UCLA. You still got to see Utah. These are tough physical teams. What does Colorado at least what do they struggle against? Physicality. Yeah. CSU understood that. Even Stanford understood that. They got physical in that second half.
I'm also curious, too, is it that they can't handle physicality, or are they struggling with focus?
Both, but here's the truth: where does focus come from?
Discipline.
But who administers that?
The coach.
Absolutely. So when we begin to really delve into this, let's go to these questions, because I want the people to know that I'm critical, not to a fault, but constructively. And trust me, I've seen, even in these first 7 games, and even from the introductory press conference and all the things with the 60 Minutes interview and those kind of things, one of the things I find interesting, I've seen an evolution in Prime's persona, even in media with coaching. Now, he's not any different than any coach that gets frustrated with the players not performing up to standards. Coaches will lament that in public. But the way he started versus where he is now says something different. There's certain things, like when he talked about one guy that was a 5-star recruit, I think it was named Kamari. I didn't like that. I thought that's something that you do in-house, but that's Prime's style. Because it's not my style don't mean he's wrong. But I really do believe that if I got a problem with a kid not watching film, I'm not throwing my kids under the bus like that. That's me. But again, I've never coached at that level. I hadn't played that game. So, hey, if you think that's cool and that's smart, that's fine. But here's the other part. I haven't really seen, maybe Urban Meyer has done that. Maybe Bill Belichick has done that. But again, those guys are champions. You're not a champion yet, at least not as a coach. You're a champion as a player. But see, what we've done is we've integrated his player success into the coaching success, and you don't have that yet.
But let's dive into that. Right?
Okay.
So like he goes in on Cromartie. Why does he go in on Cromartie? He is arguably known as the greatest corner to ever play the game.
Sure.
Right?
Arguably.
So like if you think about like from stars and them being coaches, like Michael Jordan said, he can never be a coach.
Well, he wasn't that good of an owner either, but go ahead.
Right. Well
okay.
And the struggle for him, even as the president at Washington.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, with the Wizards.
Yeah.
And then owning was the fact that they didn't the people he was drafting or the players didn't want it like he wanted it. So he couldn't coach. And then I just saw a video of Kevin Garnett talking to Shiloh and Deion. And he was like, the reason why I can't get into coaching because I gave 100% effort in everything. And I can't handle a kid not giving the same effort. So it's like, can all-time greats succeed in coaching?
They cannot.
Okay.
Because I think that Magic Johnson, Wayne Gretzky, Mike Singletary, those type of guys, the way they played the game versus the patience that it takes to develop players, that's a whole nother animal. Deion Sanders has the potential to turn that paradigm around. Now, if we expand it from football, Anthony Penny Hardaway, that's coaching at the University of Memphis, is doing a wonderful job. I doubted. I'm not going to lie. I did because, you know what, the blueprint I had was Chris Mullin, Clyde Drexler at Houston, even Patrick Ewing at Georgetown. That was what I was thinking because these were star players. And Patrick probably would have been an NBA coach. He just never got a job there. So he just took Georgetown. That was the easiest thing. That was the nice thing to do, right? But it didn't work not because Patrick couldn't coach. I just think that, or those guys couldn't coach, or if we just go back to football, it doesn't work when you don't have the patience or when you don't understand, or like I said, skipping the line. At the Power 5 level, he wasn't a defensive coordinator. He wasn't even a position coach, right? Those things matter. I think from a standpoint of mentoring and being able to see how you do things versus saying, well, I think these things do work. Now, that doesn't erase the 30-7 at Jackson State. But at the same time, I can tell you why you got to 30-7. Because honestly, being able to recruit from the Power 5 level and bring them down to the SWAC is a cheat code. If we're honest, and no shade, it is what it is. Because what we see now at the Power 5 level, you're 4-3, and your defense is horrendous. Special teams, in certain respects, is horrendous.
But out of curiosity, can we really judge him because this isn't?
It's the first year,
right?
It's fine,
right?
But we can judge him based on where he is now. 7 games. Now, again, that's why, you can't boast for tomorrow for today, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because when those things happen, when adversity shows up. Now, again, I think Prime is built for the adversity. I believe the kids are. They're gonna be just as solid as he is. And Prime definitely is built for adversity. His life story shows that he is. His successes and his trailblazing persona as a player, coach, and broadcaster speaks to those things. But as we both know, that life is not a crystal stair. It's not a crystal ball either. And here's the truth. When you put those things out there in the atmosphere with what you say, people will challenge that. And you have to make sure that you have the chin, to use a boxing analogy, to withstand those punches because they're coming. But back to the question, superstar players have trouble because they don't have the acumen of patience. It's still a space of development of me versus 85 kids versus 15 guys in the NBA, or with Wayne Gretzky in hockey, or Mike Singletary says, I need winners, can't do it. It's a famous blurb. Or even Denny Green, we let him off the hook. Those kind of guys are made in the trenches of mentorship. And I think that to a certain extent, not saying that Deion don't have mentors that he can call, but from a space of coaching with guys every day where you watch what they do, being in that room, and not just as a player, but as a coach. Those things, to me, with certain aspects of the approach to the game and strategy, is showing. Because honestly, if you've never been a coordinator on either side of the ball, and if your defensive coordinator isn't calling a great game, can you take over the defense? If your offensive coordinator is not calling a great game, can you take over the offense? Now, you can make certain executive decisions, like let's give Shador the ball. That's great, but it's not X's and O's, right? It's not the stuff that makes Mike Tomlin great with a rookie quarterback, or 15 years in the NFL, you've never had a losing season. 15 years.
Yeah.
That's coaching. Because again, college sports, and this is just not about prime, college sports and star players and star athletes, college level is cheat code, because if you can sell the best, player to come to your school, you automatically got an automatic advantage. In the NFL, you got a draft. The talent is spread out. So now we really know if you can coach. My critique of Deion, even from the SWAC to the Power 5, is that I need to know if he can really coach. We hadn't seen that yet, to be quite fair. We know he can recruit. We know that he could draw eyes to the program. And honestly, to me, he should tear up his contract. They owe him more than $5.9 a year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, considering just the persona and the attention. But you don't get that until you win. Nick Saban makes $11 million because he wins, not because people come to the campus or not because stars are on the sidelines. Those are the things that we have to be honest about. And we gotta take our fan hat off, or even something that Jamel Hill once quoted or coined. She called it black protectionism, where we want to protect guys that are in the public eye that represent us in a space because we believe, and that's one of the questions on there. Let's go to that question. Ask me that question really quickly from a space of, black coaches and Deion Sanders and the opportunities.
Does the success or failure of Deion Sanders determine opportunities for black coaches?
Yes and no. Because if we're fair, Marcus Freeman is at Notre Dame. He's 6-2. He just beat USC, a team that basically took the foot off the gas against Colorado. It was deemed as, they almost won the game. But we know that USC can't stop you and me if we played. I mean, it's just a fact. So they're 6-2. Or if you look at James Franklin, who started at Vanderbilt in the SEC, right? Now, the coach that he succeeded in the SEC, Bobby Johnson, did a decent job. They went to a couple bowl games or two, maybe won 7 games and maybe once or twice. Right? But James Franklin won 6 games out the chute, went to a bowl game, and then won 9 games the other 2 preceding seasons, and then goes to Penn State. That's a harder job. So from that perspective, it's been proven already that black coaches can coach at that level, because we've seen David Shaw. We've seen Diddy Green, who also coached at Stanford. We've seen that. The truth is, many athletic directors are afraid of black coaches. And what Deion probably can do, and to a certain extent, is open the conversation. But depending on the athletic director, because if you look at the coach at Maryland, I can't remember, his name escapes me at this time, but they just lost to Ohio State by 20 points. But they were undefeated. They have a black AD, they have a black coach, and they have a black president. So that's unprecedented. But here's the problem with the vacuum of what Prime brings to the table. No shade to him, and not his fault that he brings the boys to the yard. I'm not blaming him for that. But the persona and the perception that Deion has to be John Thompson, when the truth of the matter is, why do you say John Thompson? Because John Thompson was one of the first black coaches to win a national championship in basketball, which opened the doors for Larry Finch at Memphis State then at the time, or John Chaney, and other black coaches that came behind him, the Perry Clarks of the world. Names you probably never heard of, because, hey, that's what I do. I study, I do my homework, I understand certain different things. But when you juxtapose the comparison of college hoops and college football, college hoops is more comfortable with black coaches. Power 5 football at that level is not. You saw what happened to Mel Tucker. You see what's going on at Syracuse, right? You see those things that when black coaches, or Joker Phillips at Kentucky, or Sylvester Croom, the first black coach in the SEC that had winning seasons, who should have got the job at Alabama when you do the research too. So here's the truth. What Deion Sanders represents is change from a space of the culture itself, of hip-hop culture and those kind of things, when a black coach is actually the coach. Because we saw it in Miami. The coach just wasn't black.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Yeah.
But I think it's unfair to Deion Sanders to put that on him, Because the truth of the matter is, we've seen black coaches at the Power 5 level. We've seen Kevin Sumlin do a better job at Texas A&M and still get fired, and Jimbo Fisher got a bigger contract and still has his job, and he's mediocre there.
Yeah,
if we're fair.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Sure. Okay. Next question.
So we'll end because we already talked about should he tone down his persona.
Sure.
Right. That's a yes or no. Right. It's maybe he should, but it's just not who he is.
Yeah.
So we'll end with, is he good for college football?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's why. Because what he does is, like Allen Iverson was good for the culture. You know, he made it okay for NBA guys to be themselves. Now, some of the stuff that we see now with some of the wardrobe in the NBA, I don't think that's what AI was after. And no shade, but hey, it is what it is. Be who you are. I'm not here to police your dress. As it was believed in the early 2000s, when people were saying, and a lot of even black journalists was writing about the attire. But is Deion good for college football? Absolutely. Because the numbers prove it. Even me discussing it and talking about the gospel of the good news that Deion is actually here, and he's kicking down certain doors and breaking down certain barriers. He's creating opportunities for a lot of different people that probably wouldn't get those opportunities, even for the short time he was at Jackson State. Jackson State really has the greater sin, because had they leaned to some of the stuff that he was really asking for, maybe he's not at Colorado. Maybe he still leaves at some point in time. But maybe it's harder to leave because the money makes sense. The mission of building up black colleges from a financial standpoint through athletics makes more sense. But college football overall needs, like John Tarkanian, I believe Boyd Daniels and those kind of a playing era, Deion no profile, a World Series, AAA or single A. If I could do that Travis Hunter with him, because that was something that he could sell to a kid that was on the same trajectory.
Yeah.
So he is he's great for college football. I just hope he can last, because here's the truth. You got to win. It's just the first year. If he goes 7-5 like I predict, I think it's still a great season. I think there's still shade there to a certain extent, because 3-0 really, even for Prime, I think surprised him to a certain extent, but his personality and his charisma allowed him to lean into some things that he probably should have pulled back from. I think he knows that, because I think the tone in his press conferences has been different. And he's allowed to learn, like I've had to, like everybody does, right? So I think that makes sense. I think that he's great for college football. I just hope that he can go 7-5 and build off of this season, get some linemen in there, get Warren Sapp up there, get some dogs, like he says, to really help him do what he's called to do at Colorado, because I think that what he does is bigger than college football, and we need Deion at that level, because not only because of his faith, but because of what he represents overall. And that, I can't be critical of that. I can only be supportive of that, and if I was not, then I would be a hater. So
Yeah, good stuff.
Thanks. Well, this has been the first episode of Sports and Spiritual Things. Look, I hope you enjoyed it. Come on, please subscribe to the channel. We plan on doing more provocative conversations. We're going to have different guests that's going to come on the show. And I tell you, man, look, this Sports and Spiritual Thing, this podcast is definitely going to blow up. I really believe that. Am I boasting for tomorrow? Maybe. Am I speaking into existence? I believe I am. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Andrew Patton. Please follow us, like, share. Find me on Facebook. We're going to create a page here soon where you can follow the podcast. Look, A to Z, Mr. A to Z, thank you so much for opening up your doors. We'll see you next time for another episode and another edition of Sports and Spiritual Things. May God bless you. May he keep you is our prayer. See you soon.